Good afternoon, everybody. As always, my name is JC, and welcome to my channel, Every Man's Thoughts. Well, unfortunately, it looks like another golden opportunity has been lost to re-establish the Dungeons & Dragons brand, as the live-action TV show has now been canceled. From the article by Deadline, Dungeons & Dragons live-action series not going forward at Paramount Plus will be revamped and shopped by Hasbro. To put this in plain English, the show was canceled before it ever even got off the ground. It's now in limbo and likely to be soon forgotten. This also likely ends Hasbro's plans to turn Dungeons & Dragons into its own cinematic universe and broader household brand. For those of us who are longtime fans and have had high hopes for this recent Dungeons & Dragons renaissance, this is yet another sign that this reemergence is going to be short-lived and likely already in its death spiral. So, a little background here to explain where we've been and likely where we're going. In 1997, Wizards of the Coast purchased TSR, the company that owned Dungeons & Dragons. At that time, D&D was both a game and a brand. Although I'm not a fan of Wizards of the Coast for a wide variety of reasons, I think it's fair to say that D&D the game has generally been managed pretty well, namely turning it from a class-based game to a build-based game. Although nobody's perfect, after 25 years the game was still there and still profitable, and that can't be ignored. D&D the brand, however, is a completely different story, and make no mistake about it, Dungeons & Dragons the brand is worth exponentially more than Dungeons & Dragons the game. Now, here's where the story gets a little more interesting. So the game is going along fine, and Wizards is doing everything it can to expand the brand. In fact, within 3 years of purchasing D&D, they actually have a movie release with Jeremy Irons, and the movie was terrible. And this is how it went for the better part of 20 years. Wizards would take licensing money from whoever offered it, with no regard to quality control or protecting the brand name or the game itself, really. As time passed, the game became more niche, the brand was tarnished beyond repair, and both essentially faded from the general public consciousness. To make matters worse, Wizards of the Coast, a Seattle-based company, allowed elements of its extreme political ideology to permeate the game, which had the immediate effect of fracturing the community and alienating many of its core customers. It unfortunately got to a point where the only time you'd hear about D&D in the news was when it was being praised on Twitter by people who didn't play the game and openly mocked everywhere else by people that actually did. You almost have to wonder if some of the decisions they made weren't specifically designed to outrage people just to generate clicks and keep the game in the public consciousness. Regardless of their motivations, at this point the brand was just a punchline, and by 2012 the game itself was being outsold by its competitors. And just as both game and brand seemed destined to become nothing more than an afterthought, Wizards was the beneficiary of two completely random miracles. The first miracle was the smash hit Stranger Things. The children of Stranger Things, regularly playing the game episode after episode, introduced the game to an entirely new generation of players and crossed almost every demographic barrier. Then, with almost perfect timing, miracle number 2 happens when the lockdowns arrive. We now have hundreds of millions of potential new customers around the world who are locked in their home and desperate to find some form of home-based entertainment while being spoon-fed the perfect solution in a very popular TV series that the entire family can enjoy. Better yet, all of these new customers are completely new to tabletop RPG. They don't even know that Dungeons & Dragons has competition, let alone what the name of that competition might be. So, predictably, sales skyrocket, and now there's momentum behind the game and the brand that hasn't existed for decades. Think about all of the good things that were going on then. Sales were booming. Larian Studios announced the development of Baldur's Gate 3, and a relatively big-budget Dungeons & Dragons movie that had just been floundering for over a decade started moving forward with some real steam. All of this could, maybe even should have been the launching point for Dungeons & Dragons to become the global household brand that Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro always wanted. Movies, TV shows, toy sales, home goods, etc., you name it. Now let's take a look at what has happened since. Baldur's Gate was a smash hit, fans loved it, critics love it, it sold extremely well, and the studio that made it said they're done with Dungeons & Dragons. Then the reasonably big-budget Hollywood movie Honor Among Thieves was embroiled in controversy when people behind the production said something to the effect of they were going to subvert all of the masculine characters. The movie, which actually wasn't that bad, then proceeded to lose an estimated $100 million. It's almost like if you insult your core audience and have a permanently tarnished brand name, it's hard to capture an audience even if you have a relatively good product. Who knew? More headlines about certain traditional aspects of the game being problematic. In fact, just a few days ago, they gender swapped the warrior in the now legendary red box cover art and announced that not only is it a woman, it always has been a woman, despite the fact that the artist is still alive and has said no, it's not. Despite the recent negative headlines, Wizards is also facing some more deep-rooted issues and possibly long-lasting problems. Amidst their exciting announcement of their newest edition, Dungeons & Dragons, Wizards was almost immediately accused of trying to convert the game into a live digital service, possibly with some predatory pricing practices. Now, in fairness, I don't know how well founded those accusations are, and only time will tell, but Wizards themselves exacerbated these concerns and stepped in again when they tried to sneak in a licensing change. Although Blizzard has already backed off of the changes due to the negative backlash, this could have long-lasting implications for two reasons. First, it was in large part these very third-party publishers that were breathing fresh air into the game that was otherwise stagnating under the yoke of Wizards of the Coast. Second, some of these publishers have publicly announced that they will no longer work with Dungeons & Dragons and will instead focus on its primary competitor, Pathfinder, and others. And that brings us to where we are now. Sales are plummeting, no video games, no movies, no TV shows, or any other significant ancillary force pushing the brand beyond the kitchen table. And what could be described as the heart and soul of the game, the actual community themselves and the third-party publishers that make quality content for the community, is now fractured at best. I don't see how anybody could reasonably argue that just about all of the momentum, if not all of the momentum, has now been squandered, and we're not headed back to right where we started. However, if you are a fan and you think the game might benefit from being under somebody else's stewardship, someone who doesn't want to turn it into a digital service, someone who doesn't want to use it as a political platform, there may be some good news on the horizon. Hasbro, the toy company that ultimately owns Dungeons & Dragons, is not in a good place and has some serious need for ready cash. Thanks to Stranger Things and the lockdowns, Dungeons & Dragons is now more valuable than it likely ever will be for the foreseeable future. With no big licensing dollars on the horizon in the form of television or movies, and game sales plummeting, Hasbro may look to liquidate the IP now before its value returns to something similar to what it was before the lockdowns. Well guys, that's it for me this time. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will see you next time.